Imagine a Greek trireme on a clear day as it approaches a narrow strait. The sun is still bright, but the light begins to fade as the ship moves forward, perhaps from the shadow of the cliffs, or perhaps from something else entirely. The captain watches ahead while the oars behind him rise and fall, pulling the ship steadily onward. On one side, a cliff of polished black stone rises sheer from the water, smooth and impossible to climb. On the other, the sea itself seems to breathe, heaving, twisting, opening, and closing like a mouth that could swallow a vessel whole. The captain knows what this place demands. He has heard the stories, and this passage could save him weeks, perhaps months, of dangerous wandering. Still, there is no safe route here. Approach the cliff, and something waits above. Shapes begin to form in the rock, heads, shadows, teeth reaching down from the stone, drift toward the other side, and the water itself turns against the ship, a maelstrom that can pull hull and crew into the depths. Between these two dangers, only one choice remains: lose a few or lose everything. This is the passage between Scylla and Charybdis, not merely an obstacle faced by Odysseus on his voyage to Ithaca, but a narrow threshold where sailors were forced to choose between cliffs that kill selectively and waters that drag ships to the dark bottom of the sea, never to be found again. One of the two monsters, Scylla, was not always tied to a cliff. She was once a beautiful young woman, one of the prettiest to walk the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. Some stories tell that she was a sea nymph, living close to the water. The beauty of Scylla did not go unnoticed. In some tales, she caught the eye of Poseidon, Glaucus, even kings in some versions. And that kind of attention is never without consequence. And just like the mariners who would later sail between Scylla and Charybdis, she too would be caught between a god and a powerful sorceress. Glaucus was once a mortal fisherman, a man who made his living from the sea and knew its moods through labor and peril. One day, as he emptied his nets upon a patch of grass, he noticed that the fish he had caught began to twitch and leap back toward the water, as though revived by some unseen power. Puzzled, he searched the ground and found a strange herb growing there, its touch seeming to breathe life into the dying creatures. Overcome by curiosity, Glaucus tasted the plant himself. Instantly, a great change came over him. His mind turned seaward, his body began to transform, and the call of the deep grew irresistible. Drawn beneath the waves, he was received by the gods of the ocean and remade into something neither fully man nor god. From then on, sailors told of a mysterious figure rising from the sea to warn them of tempests and disasters, a divine mariner who understood the waters because he had once lived by their mercy. Glaucus noticed Scylla as she was walking along the shore and watched her from the sea. His heart was struck at once by love and overwhelming desire. He stepped from the water and spoke to her softly and openly, telling her what he felt for her. But the sight of him, his altered form, no longer wholly human, filled her with fear. She fled from him and climbed to a high rock above the water, out of his reach. From below, Glaucus pleaded with her, but she did not return his love. Only after this rejection did he turn away, though his desire did not loosen its hold on him. Desperate, he sought the island of Aea, home of the sorceress Circe, who dwelt among lions and wolves that had once been men. Smoke curled from her halls, and the scent of drying herbs hung thick in the air. Glaucus told her of the sea nymph who had rejected him and begged for a potion to win her love. Circe listened in silence. She knew every leaf and root that could stir or still desire, and she promised to prepare the mixture. Yet, as the potion darkened in the bowl, her gaze turned toward Glaucus himself. Her words softened. She urged him to remain on her island instead. Glaucus refused. His heart belonged to the sea and to Scylla, no matter her fear of him. Circe's calm changed to bitterness. When he departed, she gathered her herbs again, not for love, but for vengeance, and began a new potion before dawn. Scylla lived close to the coastal waters, bathing every day in a sheltered pool near the rocks. But that night, Circe came in secret and poured her magic potion into the pool before the nymph arrived to bathe. Scylla went down to bathe in a pool like she always did. Nothing about the water warned her away. When Scylla stepped into the pool, the change came quickly. Her body began to break apart from the waist down. Where legs had been, shapes tore free, snapping dog heads, twisting limbs, forms that did not belong to any single creature. Long necks surged upward, each ending in a mouth crowded with teeth. What had been a human body was pulled apart and remade into something else, something that could no longer stand on land and could not leave the water. In Ovid's telling, there is no slow transformation and no escape. Scylla becomes a monster all at once. She recoils from her own reflection and flees from the places she once knew, driven toward the edge of the sea where her new body can survive. By the time Odysseus reached the strait in Homer's Odyssey, nothing of the young woman remains. Scylla, now a monster, lurks high in a cave cut into a sheer cliff. Her lower body is fixed deep in the stone. Only her heads and necks reach out over the water. Homer describes her as having 12 legs hidden in the rock and 6 long necks stretching out over the channel, each ending in a head packed with close-set fangs. She does not pursue ships. She does not roam the sea. She waits above the waterline and strikes downward. Some older stories describe Scylla differently, as something born monstrous from the beginning, a creature of the sea without a past. If Scylla is the terror of the cliff, Charybdis is the terror of the water itself. She is not something sailors see waiting above them. She has no face leaning out from the rock, no limbs to watch for. Charybdis is known only when the sea begins to change. Her earliest descriptions are uncertain. Ancient writers struggle to give her a shape at all. She is sometimes named as a daughter of Poseidon and Gaia, but even then she is defined less as a creature than as an action. Charybdis drinks the sea. She swallows it down, holds it, and then throws it back again. Later storytellers gave her a past. In those versions, Charybdis also begins as a sea nymph, loyal to her father Poseidon. During one of the struggles between gods over land and power, she acts on his behalf. She floods coastal regions claimed by Zeus, drowning fields and settlements under rising water. Zeus answers with a thunderbolt. Charybdis is struck down and cast into the sea as punishment. Where she once moved freely, she is fixed in one place, trapped beneath the waves near the strait later identified with Messina. Her sentence is endless. She is condemned to swallow seawater and hurl it back out again over and over without rest. Unlike Scylla, Charybdis has no cave cut into the rock. She has no visible body at all. Ancient writers place her beneath a fig tree on the opposite shore, but what sailors encounter is not a creature. It is a whirlpool. At regular intervals, the sea begins to drain. Water rushes inward, spinning, pulling downward, disappearing into a widening throat. Then, just as suddenly, it erupts again, belching water and wreckage back to the surface. Ancient descriptions say this happens 3 times a day, each cycle violent enough to pull even large vessels toward its center. Where Scylla is tied to stone, Charybdis is tied to the sea itself. You cannot see where she begins or ends. There is no edge to strike and nothing to fight. There is only the water twisting, dropping away, and closing again. Sailors feared Charybdis because she meant total annihilation. A ship caught in her pull did not lose a few men and limp onward. It vanished in a whirlpool of death. Hull, cargo, crew, everything was dragged down, smashed in the dark, and scattered. If anything returned to the surface, it was broken wood and fragments drifting hours later, long after the sea had gone calm again. In the Odyssey, Odysseus did not lose his crew to Charybdis when he first passed the strait. He kept the ship close to Scylla's cliff and paid her price instead, and though 6 men were taken into the rock, the hull survived, and the oars carried the rest safely through. But the strait did not release him entirely. Before he left Aea, Circe had warned him of another danger beyond those waters, the island of Thrinacia, where the cattle of Helios grazed in sacred herds. He was not to harm them. He was not even to land there if he could avoid it. Yet, storms drove the ship off course, and for days, the wind pinned them against that shore while their food ran out. Hunger broke what fear had held in place. While Odysseus slept inland, his men slaughtered the cattle and roasted the meat, knowing the warning and choosing to ignore it. When they put out to sea again, the sky darkened without rain. Zeus struck the ship with a thunderbolt. The mast split, the deck shattered, the hull broke apart beneath them, and the crew vanished into the water. Only Odysseus remained, clinging to wreckage as the current carried him back toward the strait. The whirlpool lay where it had always been. With no ship left and no men to lose, he climbed into the roots of a fig tree that clung to the rock above Charybdis and hung there while the sea drained downward and surged back again. When the broken timbers rose to the surface, he dropped onto a floating beam and let the current draw him clear. Sailors did not speak of Charybdis as a creature with limbs or a face. They spoke of a place where the sea swallowed ships whole and returned nothing but fragments. Over time, Greeks and Romans matched Scylla and Charybdis to a real place, the Strait of Messina, the narrow channel between the toe of Italy and the island of Sicily. At its narrowest point, the distance between shores is small, but the water moves fast. The coastline rises sharply from the sea, and the currents shift direction with the tides and the wind. Sailors did not need maps to understand the danger. Water from the Tyrrhenian Sea to the north and the Ionian Sea to the south is forced through the strait again and again, setting up powerful currents, standing waves, and sudden whirlpools. Changes in depth make the movement worse. A ship can be shoved toward the rocks on one side or dragged into unstable water on the other with little warning. For a small vessel hugging the coast, this was not theory. A mistimed stroke of the oar or a gust of wind at the wrong moment could smash a hull against the cliffs of Calabria or Sicily, or push it into water that spun and pulled without pattern. Local tradition around Messina still speaks of Scylla and Charybdis. Markers point to rocks and turbulent stretches of sea. Stories linger. The myth gave sailors words for what they faced: the cliff that tears and the water that swallows. Ancient writers sometimes tried to explain the story away, suggesting that Scylla and Charybdis were nothing more than a dangerous rock and a treacherous whirlpool, later turned into monsters by poets. For thousands of years, we have spoken their names when forced to choose between two evils. If Scylla takes men, Charybdis takes everything. And when the water closes again, it leaves no sign that anything was ever there.